So, hello, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to Sutta in the City, coming to you live from New York City and Westchester County, where Stephen is. Not quite in the city, not quite Bridge and Tunnel, but just, a little north in the suburbs.
Sutta and the suburbs.
That's right. So, it's really great to see you all again. Always a pleasure. And tonight we continue with our topic of anger, our prescient, our timely, our all important topic, which may seem pleasant or unpleasant, but it's all just part of the aggregates. So I am going to read to you a poem that I thought related somewhat, at least, to tonight. And it's called Only the Blind, which I picked specifically because I really love the simile with these blind men and the elephant. Although Stephen seemed to think that the poem was dark, it wasn't meant that way. I thought it was illuminating. So Only the Blind by Helen Bryant. Bandage my eyes tightly, tightly. Only the blind can find the way rightly. Only the blind can tread the road of illusion. Bandage my eyes, he said. Light is confusion. So I'm not going to explicate any further on that, much to Stephen's disappointment. But
no.
I know. Are you feeling the anger
I'm
vibe there?
More confusion.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we can disabuse you of that. So tonight's sutta, as I mentioned, this is a very famous sutta. Probably a lot of you have heard of the sutta, not just in the Buddhist context, but it's often used in other spiritual contexts as well. However, historically, I think the Buddha was the first. What do you think, Stephen? Was the Buddha the first?
Well, as you said, I think it's used in a lot of different Indian traditions. But I think the earliest known instance has been traced back to this one, which is in a book in the Pali Canon called the Udana, which is a word that translates somewhat awkwardly to something like exalted utterance or exclamation. And it's a series of short texts which always end in a poem or verse, and that verse is supposed to be the udana, the exalted utterance, because it is said that the Buddha sort of spontaneously recited verse on some occasions for some sort of momentous declaration. So yes, it's a very well-known simile, and it was used, and it's probably very hard to say, well, this is the first one because we're dealing with an entirely oral tradition. But we can say this was the first one. Why not?
It's the first one. Great. And I'm going to share that with you now.
And we also see somewhat of the partisan politics that we sometimes see in the Pali Canon, because we're referred to those from outside traditions, right? Mm-hmm. Sectarians, various other views. And so we're always sort of pointed towards the difference between those who follow the Buddha and those who choose not to. And those who choose not to are never really portrayed in a super flattering light.
Great. So thank you for that brief illustration of the Udana, a book that I truly love. And we will need, of course, as always, some readers. There will be some parts that we're going to stop and then just kind of summarize for you, because if you've looked at the sutta ahead of time, it is a little repetitive. We'll keep all of the critical parts though, so no worries there. So if we can have a show of hands of those who would like to read tonight, we've got a lot of reading.
It is a characteristic of some of these texts to kind of repeat things sometimes we don't have repeats and we have no idea what was missing. Other times we have seemingly too many repeats and we rather cut them out. We, and so we try not to be disappointed or angry.
Definitely. We definitely try that. So I think I heard Sue Ann saying that she'll read. So the
Yes,
rest of you, if you'd like to read, please click on your hand, raise your hand so you can read, and we'll start with Sue Ann.
thank you. The first discourse about the various sectarians. Thus I heard, at one time the gracious one was dwelling near Savatthi in Jedda's wood at Anathapindika's monastery. Then at that time, many and various sectarians, ascetics, brahmanas, and wanderers were living in Savatthi, having various views, various likings, various tendencies, subject to dependence on various views, such as there were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The world is eternal. This alone is the truth. All else is foolishness. There were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The world is not eternal. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. There were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The world is finite. This alone is true. All else is foolishness. But there were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The world is finite. This alone is the truth. All else is foolishness.
Thank you so much, Sue Ann.
You're
Next
welcome.
up, we have Duncan.
There were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view, that which is the soul, that is also the body. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. But there were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The soul is one thing, the body is another thing. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. There were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The individual exists after death. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. But there were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The individual does not exist after death. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish.
Thank you so much, Duncan. And next we have Diane Brodson.
There were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The individual exists and does not exist after death. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. But there were some ascetics and brahmanas who were of this argument, this view. The individual neither exists nor does not exist after death. This alone is the truth. All else is foolish. They lived contending, quarreling, disputing, attacking each other with sharp tongues, saying, such is Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is Dhamma. Then many monks, having dressed in the morning time, after picking up their bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms. After walking for alms in Savatthi, while returning from the alms round after the meal, they went to the Gracious One, and after going and worshiping the Gracious One, they sat down on one side. While sat on one side, those monks said this to the Gracious One. Here, Reverend Sir, many and various sectarians, ascetics, brahmanas, and wanderers are living at Savatthi, having various views, various likings, various tendencies, subject to dependence on various views such as.
Okay, but here is our big repeat.
Yes, this is the big repeat.
Does this sound at all familiar?
I do want to say one thing. The actions sound familiar. The arguing, this is the truth and everything else is dumb. But I have to say, when I was reading this, that I found it very refreshing that at least the views were such that regarded spirituality and spiritual truths rather than political parties, political ideation, economics, things of that nature. Of course, spiritual views too can become contentious. We all know that. But I just found the subject matter of the argumentation, let's just say I found it much more enlightening than what seems to be going around, at least in this country now. That's my view, though.
We can say it was a lofty set of arguments.
It was lofty, but
But it also strikes me that there is no one who seems to say, well, I just don't know. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone is certain of something. Nobody's saying, well, how would I know? Who knows?
right. I forgot the famous theologian who said that the opposite of faith is certainty. And I just love that. And I wish I could, if any of y'all remember who that was who said that, let us know. But I think it's beautiful. Certainty just closes off all other options. So we'll just do a quick review. So they're just talking to the Buddha about all of these various views about the world, if it's eternal, if it's finite, if it's infinite, the soul, it's the body. And please feel free to read all of that again if you feel comfortable reading that all over again. But we're not finding it necessary at this point right now. But it's basically what we just read. And so now we start here with the Buddha giving his response. And we will have Todd read the words of the Buddha.
Formerly, monks, in this Sawati there was a certain king. Then that king, monks, addressed a certain man, saying, "Please go, dear sir, as many of those congenitally blind as there are in Sawati, assemble them in one place." "Yes, your majesty," said the man, monks, and after replying to the king, and after taking hold of all those congenitally blind in Sawati, he went to the king, and after going, he said this to the king: "As many of those congenitally blind as there are in Sawati, your majesty, have assembled." "Then show them an elephant, I say, to those congenitally blind." "Yes, your majesty," said the man, monks, and after replying to the king, he showed an elephant to those congenitally blind, saying, "Such is an elephant, blind men."
Okay, Todd, can you just pause right there? I'm getting word over the transom that I was overzealous in skipping.
I think we might have skipped a section. No? Isn't there a section that says they don't know what is good, they don't know what is not good? Maybe not. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. After the recap.
Okay.
I think it was the section just before Regina, Todd was reading.
Okay.
So as you scrolled it, Regina.
Okay. Did I pass it?
Yeah, it's right
Right
there.
here.
Wanderers from other sects.
Okay, Todd, could you read that for us? And thank you, James.
Sure. "Wanderers from other sects, monks, are blind, without vision. They do not know what is good. They do not know what is not good. They do not know what is Dhamma. They do not know what is not Dhamma. They, not knowing what is good, not knowing what is not good, not knowing what is Dhamma, not knowing what is not Dhamma, live contending, quarreling, disputing, attacking each other with sharp tongues, saying, 'Such is a Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is Dhamma.'"
Thank you so much, Todd. And then we have the Buddha speaking about the king. And what does the king want? He wants to gather up all the blind people, blind men of the village. And so that has been done. And when he does that, he says, show them, then show an elephant, I say, to those congenitally blind. "Yes, your majesty," said that man, monks, and after replying to the king, he showed an elephant to those congenitally blind, saying, "Such is an elephant, blind men." Okay, and so what we have here is one of the blind persons, grabs the elephant's head. It's like, okay, let me feel this. This is an elephant. And then another playing around with the ears, getting a sense of the elephant. And the same with the tusk and the trunk. One person is like, you know, feeling with his hands the side of the elephant's body. The other one is checking out the leg of the elephant, the thigh, the tail, and then the tip of the elephant's tail. Okay, so this is what all of these blind men did at the order of the king. And so we need some more readers to see what's going to happen.
Seems like a very patient elephant.
It is a patient elephant.
Regina, why don't you read some more while we wait for more people?
I was going to call in James.
James Cook.
Okay, you asked for it. Let me see. So we're right there with the then monks?
Yes.
Okay. Then monks, that man, having shown the elephant to those congenitally blind, went to the king. And after going, he said this to the king. Those congenitally blind have seen the elephant, your majesty. Now is the time for whatever you are thinking, your majesty. Then that king monks went to the congenitally blind, and after going, he said this to those congenitally blind. Did you see the elephant, blind men? Yes, your majesty, we did see the elephant. Speak, blind men, and say, such is an elephant.
Okay, then thank you so much for filling in the clutch there. It was very helpful. And we have Linda Rose next.
Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's head, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a pot. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's ear, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a winnowing fan. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's tusk, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a plowshare. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's trunk, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a plow pole. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's body, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a storehouse. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's leg, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a pillar. Those congenitally blind who had seen the elephant's thighs, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a mortar. Those congenitally blind who had seen the top of the elephant's tail, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a pestle. Those congenitally blind who had seen the tip of the elephant's tail, monks, said this, such is an elephant, your majesty, he is like a broom.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Yes.
And next we have Ayavimala.
And they saying, such is an elephant, such is not an elephant, such is not an elephant, such is an elephant, hit each other with their fist. And with that, monks, the king was pleased. Just so, monks, wanderers from other sects are blind, without vision. They do not know what is good. They do not know what is not good. They do not know what is Dhamma. They do not know what is not Dhamma. They, not knowing what is good, not knowing what is not good, not knowing what is Dhamma, not knowing what is not Dhamma, live contending, quarreling, disputing, attacking each other with sharp tongues, saying, such is Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is not Dhamma, such is Dhamma. Then the gracious one, having understood the significance of it, on that occasion uttered this exalted utterance. Some ascetics and brahmanas, it seems, are attached to these views. Having grasped a hold of it, they dispute it, like people who see only one side.
Thank you so much. And wow, what a powerful teaching that is. it's incredible what people will come to blows over. And if it seems a little silly, I'm not surprised that people would come to blows over what an elephant is. It's amazing what people do fight over, even to this day, thousands of years later. Now, we say that we are, we're so advanced, but we're really still those same psychobiosocial beings that existed, 2,500 years ago in the time of the Buddha, living on fight or flight and defending views. What is your thought, Stephen? Should we just give up having any views at all and anything goes and whatever someone says is right? Because essentially, each of these men was right, but not, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't think they were wrong, but maybe they only saw one side. And so maybe it seems at least a big part of the problem here is that people see part of the picture and then draw out a big conclusion, but they might not have all the information they need to draw that large overall confusion. And so it's interesting that the Buddha here is quite, we might say, sectarian, or he's basically saying, the Dhamma is this. He's not sort of so inclusive, right? He's not saying, well, everyone is sort of entitled to their opinion. He's basically saying they're wrong. But maybe what's more interesting than just saying, well, they're wrong, is he's sort of explaining why people are wrong. And I think a big part of that is because they only see part of the picture and they become very attached to that perception, and they become very hard to budge if they're shown more information or different pieces of the puzzle.
It reminds me of that poem that we once had a couple of months ago. I believe it was Alexander Pope. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not of the Pyrenean spring.
Yeah.
So what does this mean when people have partial knowledge, but assume they have full knowledge and then fight over their being correct? It's dangerous.
And it also seems to show that people are very eager to sort of display their knowledge and to be right while someone else is wrong. It's sort of a tendency, instead of saying, well, what did you see? And how can I put all these pieces? What we don't see in this whole story is everyone getting together and sort of comparing notes and maybe putting it together to be one large piece of one large composite picture, but rather everyone essentially saying, well, what I saw is what it is. I don't think what you saw is really very important to me. And so therefore, I'm not interested in what you think. And clearly you're wrong. And so this eagerness to dispute, eagerness to be right, gets us often into a lot of trouble. But we have a couple of pictures, because these similes we find often in the suttas are of a time along 2,500 years ago in a very different kind of society. So we were able to find a picture of a winnowing fan. Well, here it's called a winnowing fan. I think other people translate as the winnowing basket, where the harvested grain would be placed in and then shaken and blown on to separate it out. And it does, if we can find it, look very much like an ear.
Oh, so this is used to separate the wheat from the chaff, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And I think this basket is from Bihar state. So, maybe if you were blind and you touched this, you might think that this was an ear. It's possible. And we have a picture of a plowshare, which is something I never understood what it meant at all. But in fact, it's that sort of pointy, curved piece of the plow that digs into the earth as it's pulled along by the animal. So this is some ancient plow. And so the plowshare is a typical piece of simile we find in the canon.
Mm-hmm.
But I never even understood what a plowshare was.
Well, now we do.
Now we know.
Now we do
Whether that
know.
helps us be less disputatious, I'm not sure.
But it does look like this would be pushed by a human, Stephen.
Well, I think it would be attached to an animal, and the human would stand on the left and sort of guide it along.
Okay, well, it doesn't look too fun for the human or the animal, I must say.
Todd? Maybe Todd has some good plow info on it for us.
I'm not a farmer, but I wanted to ask a question. Do you think in this sutta the Buddha is saying that it's the same as the one about a handful of leaves versus all the leaves in the forest? That he knows all the leaves in the forest, he knows what an elephant is, but what he's teaching is only one thing at a time.
I have to admit, that hadn't occurred to me. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a wonderful sutta. To me, that sutta you just described has the sense of what we should focus on is a limited number of things, because as the Buddha says, what I teach is suffering and the end of suffering. Or he also says something like, just like the taste of the ocean is one, which is salt, so too is my teaching, which is liberation from suffering. But I think here what's being pointed out to more so is that people are blind. People are not able to see very well. And so the question becomes, well, then how can they open their eyes? How to get the bigger picture? How does one obtain more information and not have the mind push back on it and become angry, disputatious, and resentful by it? So it's an interesting analogy. I would have to think about it more. What do you think, Todd? Do you think that those two suttas are sort of in the same vein?
Well, I was thinking about, someone knows what the whole elephant looks like, the king, and, the people feeling them don't know exactly what it is. So someone is omniscient, sort of, and the rest of us are not. So I was just wondering if that's sort of like what the Buddha said, he's omniscient, he knows all the leaves in the forest versus the handful of leaves that he talks about.
It's interesting. It's interesting to contemplate.
How do I raise my hand?
Sorry, go ahead.
How do I unraise my hand?
I think you go to the place that you raised it and you can undo it.
Oh, thanks.
Sophia, do you have some good plow information for us?
Yes, I was thinking in the aggregates and our nature of being so limited for fragmentation. This point of view was contemplated by Greek philosophy and before, that it is impossible for human beings and the mind and the conscious to see the totality. That is the opposite of the Buddha idea of illumination. Then the idea that, as you said, Stephen, that the idea is not be attached to our point of view, because it's only a point of view. It's not the totality, it's not the reality, it's partial. And if we notice that, we are not going to be so attached to our point of view.
Thank you for that, Sophia. I think that what you just said is so important, and it speaks to the importance of an ingredient that we seem to lack in our culture today. And maybe it's the way it always has been, and that is humility. And it seems that there's this current drive to be certain, have the answer, the only answer, rather than hearing other perspectives, having humility, knowing that others can have information that can enlighten us. For example, in this particular sutta, it is true that if instead that each of the men being so certain that they knew what an elephant was just by touching one part of it, if they could have sat together in a circle and each discussed what they learned, they could put it together. But it's just that lack of humility, that certainty. Remember that I had brought up before, certainty being the lack of the opposite of faith, that sort of dooms us into our very narrow vision of what is and what is not. So I think that's incredibly important. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think in terms of having the omniscient eye or being able to see things as they really are in total, one would be a Buddha. And since we're not, it's hard to imagine what that would be like. Thank you for that.
That's good. I was just going to say, I was just reminded of a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Twos, which talks about the two ways one can arrive at right view. Because, of course, right view is so important, looking at things correctly. And it says the two things that are required for right view, the voice of another and mindful, wise reflection.
Oh,
And
I
so
love that.
we have to not only look internally, but we do need the help of people externally. So yeah, if only those guys, only if those blind people had, as you say, got together and compared notes and reported what they had found, they could have perhaps all helped one another and come up with a very good map of an elephant.
And I just want to say one thing, and then we'll go to Stephanie. One of the I've read this past year. There have been a few articles on the New York Times that we really like to speak with those, associate with those, and be around people who share our own opinion and our own ideas. Our brain doesn't like to hear other ideas. It's not that we're closed-minded necessarily. It's that it takes effort, and making that effort to hear someone else's perspective, even if we don't agree with it, it actually creates neuronal growth, neurons. It's neurogenerative. So it's really important to listen to other perspectives, whether we think they're kooky or what have you, for many different reasons. So Stephanie?
Yeah, actually, that was sort of on the same plane. I was thinking, Regina, there's something I heard in this reading for the first time that I've never actually paid attention to. I've always been sort of stuck in just how their personal experience has limited them from being able to be open. But something that just dawned on me this time, I don't know why, for the first time, was, and maybe it's because we're in such a time of such loud nativism and nationalism. But I thought the other thing that limits them is, the brain is such an organ of association. So each of them are associating this elephant to what they know. And they happen to be all of the same culture, ostensibly. So there's this agreement, and, to what you were saying, Regina. But that also is very limiting to us, that we have these limited typologies in our mind that are so culturally dictated that it causes us a lot of problems and a lot of suffering. And I just hadn't, for whatever reason, sort of been drawn to that part of the reading. So thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And the point is like, we do like to be right, and insisting we're right and closing off all other options, as you said, limits us and causes tremendous suffering for others and ourselves. It's very painful. So thank you, Stephanie.
And what we think is so highly conditioned, as Stephanie said, I think, based on our prior experiences. And so it's very hard to think outside the box if you're not willing to open your mind up.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And just to emphasize, opening up one's mind necessitates the possibility of us being incorrect. And that has to be tolerable. If we can tolerate that notion, we can have tremendous growth in our lives. Duncan, you had your hand up.
I had a question about the text at the very beginning of when the king asks a certain man to bring the blind together, and then the man brings the blind men together, And then the sentence is, to some of those congenitally blind, he showed the elephant's head. So he shows the elephant's head to one blind person, and then he shows the elephant's ear to another. So it seems like this man is guiding the gullible blind people to find one part of the elephant and believe it's the whole elephant. But it's not just the blind people blundering around, they're being guided into a delusion, don't you think? What is this, before concluding anything, what does it mean that they phrase it like this, that there's an intermediary person, this man who shows each blind person a different part of the elephant? There's an active role there for this man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wonder what you make of that.
Right. Thank you for that, Duncan.
Yeah.
Stephen, you.
Well, he does seem to be showing part of the elephant to different parts of the people. He's not asking each person to go around the whole elephant and touch the whole thing. That is true. And there definitely seems to be a somewhat malicious mindset, because at the end it says he was really pleased by this confusion.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you so much for that, Duncan. Agreed. This is, again, I'm trying to be careful with this, because I think that, okay, so I didn't want to bring this up, but yeah, we are shown things and we are guided. I mean, I will just I live in the United States, and I know that we have people from other countries on here, and so I can't speak to that, but the way I am seeing things is that, and probably it always has been this way, I think much more nowadays, is with social media, which I've talked a lot about with you guys, but with social media and with 24/7 news channels that have their own perspectives, people are being guided. And much like these blind men, they are believing that the part to the elephant, or the part of the story, or the perspective of the story is true. So without reaching over to other parts of the elephant, just grabbing onto the head and like, this is it. Yes, I get the whole picture now. We have to be so careful not to be too credulous, because there's a delusion out there, and there are, I don't want to say forces, but there are instances where we can be easily led astray, probably every day in our lives. Most of them are on our smartphone, but thank you for pointing that out, Duncan, because yes, it's a big part of the picture as well. And again, remember, the Buddha said that our practice is against the stream. So it's important, like for me, when I listen to news, which I try to do less and less now, I just scan the headlines, but I just have to remember, there's a lot more than this. I'm not seeing the whole picture. I'm going to leave it at that. And Leonardo has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yes, just following up on that idea. We're just somehow acting out as we share different perspective of readings of this sutta, being this blind man. That in our case, we're trying to share our information. But what I'm trying to say is that also we don't need an external misleading force. We just were reading not far ago about how the five aggregates can be our enemies and can lead us to death. So it's something that seems to be, this text could be read, these external characters can be read as one subjectivity being misled and misinterpreting reality. And for some reason, I have been playing a little bit with this thought that at least I have not read all the suttas, but one one common subject that it's always at the core seems to me is a no self, like not so much hidden agenda in which the message seems to be saying, please just get it. There is no such a thing as a self, and because if you attach to these views and 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 you identify with those views as your own, ultimately you may end up realizing that it's a delusional strategy of some of the aggregates to make you think that there is this self and that this is you. Um, most of the times I'm seeing that. I don't know if I'm just, of course, seeing a partiality. I'm being part of the elephant, uh, but it seems like a very strong message, and I think one of the most difficult to grasp for all of us. Because impermanence, well, we cannot like it, but we see it, and, and um, but interdependence, we may have a hard time understanding, but we can see it. But then the idea of no self and no grasping to nothing as I, my, mine, that I think is one of the most difficult.
I agree. I think it's very difficult because it seems obvious to us, just as it seemed obvious to the blind man who touched the elephant, that
Yeah.
this is a broom, because that's all he knew, brooms. And so
And,
obviously these are my thoughts. Who else's could they be, right? And
and the
so
problem is to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we have to overcome this conditioning to think things that appear to be obvious, which are in fact incorrect.
In our, I think, instinct to relate to identify with those ideas as me, this is my, how can you think different if this is the way things are, because it's me. uh, and I think that's very important too. But that's my partial view of things. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I had spoken last week about these little assignments that we were going to intersperse throughout this. So the key thing, I know it came up last Sunday, was what do I do when someone makes me angry or does something, or how do I stop them from being angry? And the key thing here, which is very important, is for us to reflect on ourselves, on our reactions, and how we can learn from them. So a big part of recognizing how to um, attenuate or make less this this hindrance of anger, of aversion, is to first recognize it. Because there's so many people who don't even recognize when they're experiencing it. So we took a low level hindrance, sort of, or one that is hopefully can be easily discerned by you guys. And of course, no one's required to do this homework, but I think it would be beneficial. So I have this little chart up, and I have this little quote from the Buddha to Ananda: do not pass judgment on people. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. This is key. It's not just harming them. It may not even touch them, but it's what it does to us. So I put this little sheet together. You guys can fill it out or just toss it. But, it has these columns. There's a situation. These are real life situations. Okay, so I was watching someone on TV heat up food in a package in a microwave. And I was like, oh my God, that's a petroleum byproduct. They're giving themselves cancer. And then this friend said, no, that's not true. Food is, you see, I'm being judgmental. Food is packaged in cellophane, which is a natural product. I am like very environmentally conscious. And so what was my first thing? Was it to be open-minded and listen? No, actually I was really angry. I was like really angry. I was frustrated. I'm like, but this is bad. And so there were these judgmental thoughts that arose out of these emotions. Oh, she's not so smart. She thinks she is, but she's not. And first was the emotion, then were these judgmental thoughts. And then there's like the physiological response. The body will respond to our emotions. And, you know, I was like wanting to speak loud. No, that's not true, which is sort of aggressive, right? Tightening of the hands. And then the actual response, you know, the famous eye roll. Now, see, I'm not super proud of this, but this is actually what happened. And then here's another example. You can read it at your leisure. But I thought it would be fun if some of y'all were open to try this, to come up with some of your own examples in your life. These types of things happen all the time, and it doesn't have to be as huge as mine were. And just try and fill out these little boxes. And then after doing that, write a couple of sentences about the experience. But, you know, after you fill out the boxes, just write down what happened. But instead of saying, oh my God, can you believe, you know, he's so stupid, just do it very like robotic. He said this, and then he said this, and then did that. Just the facts only, no emotions, right? And then assume that you're them and write it from their perspective. And just do that and see what happens. Now, why is Regina giving you this assignment? This is really helpful in many ways. One, as I said, a lot of people are not aware of when these little tendencies come up, how often they come up. It's easy to pass them over. But if they become habitual, it can be a problem, because it's a hindrance, it's aversion, it's anger, and that's harmful to ourselves. So I'm thinking that this can be a helpful way to look at how we interact with others, how it affects us physically, how we respond, and how can we see it in a different way? Is it possible to? And if we do that, how do we feel afterwards? So if you feel like it, I would encourage you to do it just once or twice or 20 times, whatever. And if you want to, you can share it with us. We'll do one or two. I'm going to have Stephen do one or two. He doesn't know that yet. So we'll have more to talk about on this journey through anger. So we have to go in it to come out of it, you guys. We can do it. It's not easy, but it can be done. And I just want to thank you all for coming tonight, for sticking with this topic. And I'm looking forward to seeing you Sunday or Monday. For those of you who are starting your day, have a beautiful, beautiful day. For those of you who are getting ready to go to bed, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Stephen.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Regina. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.